G'day everybody and welcome to episode 5 of the Basketball Ballarat Hoops Tales podcast. It is a privilege for episode 5 to have a guest on, the Director of Coaching for Basketball Ballarat and also the NBL 1 Ballarat Miners head coach, Brendan Joyce. Brendan, thanks for jumping on, mate.
Hey Ryan, it's great to be here, mate.
Love it. So tell me, Chock, what's life like been for you during this whole COVID crisis?
Well, I think like a lot of us, like yourself, and we all know that's been really difficult. You know, since the middle of March, we were all actually stood down, as you know, and for a period of time, and then we were able to do some work online with JobKeeper. We went back for a couple of weeks and helped out with the domestic clubs and worked to get them back on track. But I think this second lockdown has been really tough. You know, the first lockdown, we all organised some stuff online, you know, some training videos for the players, for the juniors, and they've been really well received. I know you've put in a lot of work as well, not only for our rep kids, for the domestic kids. So across the board, you know, really the association's done quite a bit to keep everybody engaged. We've all chipped in. But this second lockdown's a lot tougher. Hopefully it's only for a couple more weeks, but it's probably tougher on the kids more so than us. But we want to get back to work full time, don't we? And
Absolutely,
you know, put in the work with the kids, not only from a domestic level, but the elite kids that are really haven't had much since the middle of March.
Very true, Chock. So, if you can now, Brendan, obviously being the Director of Coaching for us here in Ballarat, and also the head coach of our NBL 1 Miners side, can you give the viewers a little bit of a, overview of your time in the sport of basketball through your playing career all the way through to your coaching? And I know that's a pretty fair list and a bit to talk about, but if you could just give everybody a bit of a overview of what your time in the sports looked like.
Yeah, it looked like everybody. I started as a 9-year-old. And you look at some of those photos, there are some photos running around. I think when I was 11, you know, I played for a team called the Wildcats in Melbourne. They're actually called the Presbyterian Wildcats. And I remember going home to Mum. One of my mates said to me, "Oh, you should play basketball. You know, you're pretty good at it." And we're all playing footy, of course, at this time. And so anyway, he had me join up a team, and they called the Presbyterian Wildcats. And they actually played in the Victorian Basketball Association at under 12. So I went home to Mum and said, "Mum, I'm going to play basketball." She said, "Oh, that's good." And she said, "What's the name of the team?" And I said, "The Presbyterian Wildcats." She said, "You can't play for them." I said, "Why is that?" She said, "Oh, you're a Catholic." And I go, "What do you mean?" So, you know, as a typical kid, who cares about religion, you know, and everything else? It was just a kid wanting to play basketball. It was just a name. And they ended up changing their name, you know, to the Heidelberg Wildcats because they were going to have a stadium. They're quite a powerful club. You know, Barry Barnes and Owen Ewan, they were involved back then in the senior programs, but I'm talking about under 12s and 14s. So, and then eventually we changed our name, what we were called, we became Nunawading, and which everybody knows today. And, you know, Nunawading became the Southeast Melbourne Magic, which joined together with the Saints. So pretty much as a junior, I was brought up in that program under really good coaches, I feel. Colin Goodee was a brilliant junior coach. So I pretty much played me junior basketball, you would say today, with Nunawading as a junior, and that's what everyone remembers. And with that, obviously made, you know, fortunate to make numerous state teams from under 12s to under 20s. I was captain of the under 12s. There's a photo running around. It's I don't know if you can obtain it, right? It's pretty crazy when you look back and look at that photo, the Wright brothers and a guy named Dean Templeton. He's just massive ahead of everybody else. And, you know, right through to the under 20s, I was captain of the under 20 Victorian team. So, you know, I remember playing in Canberra and, you know, winning every game. And you know, that's a great memory of winning the national championship, as you know, in juniors. So in under 20s. So pretty much, you know, fortunate to win a couple of Victorian championships as a junior as well. But had all my junior basketball really in Victoria, and senior basketball started out playing with Nunawading. You know, it's just part of it was I was introduced to senior basketball being a junior. Probably when I was 15, 16 years of age, I started training with the senior team. And that's how you came through the pathway back then. They wanted to blood you quickly. They threw you to the wolves, basically. And the older players obviously weren't happy about the young kids coming up. They used to belt you.
Yeah.
Now it was back then. that was a bit of a christening or a bit of a introduction to, hey, if you're any good boy, you got to get through this too. So,
Yeah.
And that's before the NBL days. We played in the Victoria Basketball Association. So Nunawading, we had two teams in what was called the VBA back then, which was the main competition. Each state had their main competition, and there was the Nunawading team. We had a second team called Box Hill. Melbourne Tigers, they had their second team called the Auburn Tigers. So what those two teams were made up of, usually our team was made up of older players and like babies like myself, Dean Templeton, even Robbie Scrigney, who people remember, Damien Carroll. We all played games in it at around about 16 years of age, and we're playing against men. So, and the men, you knew all about it when you were playing against those teams like the Melbourne Tigers and the St Kilda Saints. And it was a really strong competition, but really quickened our development and probably, played a role in how I look at things as coach. As you know, Ryan, I'll throw the kids in there if they want to be involved with this to try and expedite their development. So, then the NBL came along in 79. So I was a part of that. Didn't play the whole season, but played a few games and pretty much was in the NBL from the first year and right up till I think I retired in 91 or the end of 91. So I had about 13 years. I had 7 years with the Spectres and 6 years with the Saints. And probably towards the end of my career, Ryan McKew, who'd coached me with the St Kilda Saints, recruited me to Brisbane. So I actually finished me last year in playing in Brisbane. Playing an NBL grand final, played 7 years in finals. They were, you talk about highlights and downtimes, it was just fantastic. And during that period as well, in the early 80s, we used to still play in the Victorian Basketball Association. So on a Wednesday night, and that competition was as strong as the NBL because we had 5 NBL teams back then, counting Geelong Supercats. They would come down and there'd be Melbourne Tigers, Coburg Giants and Kilda Saints and the Nunawading Spectres. So, and it was made up of obviously other teams as well, but, everyone took it pretty seriously. So I was fortunate to captain both the Nunawading Spectres and the Saints, the 2 different periods I played for them and won four VBA championships, but lost an NBL grand final when I was pretty young in 1981. So, when you're about 21 and you lose the grand final, you think you're going to play in it the next year or the year after. And I learned a hard lesson that those opportunities don't always come around. So you've got to make the most of them. And when I became a coach, obviously coaching the Wollongong Hawks, they'd never won a championship. When we got to that point in 2001, where we lost game 2 to Townsville, I had a serious talk with the boys because they're actually arguing with each other about, hey, we've still got game 3 to play and it's an opportunity. And I talked to them about my experience thinking I was going to play in a lot of, more grand finals because we had a great team and we'd lost in 81. And I shared that with them. One of the stories some people would know after that grand final in Adelaide, myself, and this is what I shared with them, is that myself, Alan Black and Peter Stacker, we were part of the Spectres team. And when we walked out of Apollo Stadium, which is in South Australia, we threw our runner-up medals, like spoiled brats, walking out of the stadium to the back of the stadium. And because we were so upset and down about not winning it. And, at that time, I guess there was anger, just embarrassment, thinking we passed up that opportunity. And thinking going back to it, thinking I will win it next year or the year after. But I can tell you one year I jumped in the car in 1986 or 87, I think it was. We were playing Adelaide. And I didn't tell anyone, but I went in the car and drove back to Apollo Stadium and went down the back. And I spent about an hour trying to find that medal, hoping to pick it out of the mud, that runner-up medal. So that's a true story. So I shared that with
you didn't get the medal. You didn't find it.
No, I couldn't find it, so I haven't got my runner-up medal. So if anyone's got a spare one out there, or if anyone found it, can you send it to me? I mean, so I'm sure the other 2 boys haven't got it. And so in 2001, game 3, I shared the story with the boys saying, hey, you'll never get this opportunity. You might not get this opportunity. Don't think it's going to be there next year. And we need to pull it together. We've got 12 hours and, let's focus on how we're going to get it done. So, it's been a bit motivational in some respects to just give them a reality check about the situation. And sharing that, that night, I think it had a bit of an impact. on a few of them anyway.
Definitely.
But we just went over our goals and, you know, what each player's responsibilities were to turn it around in game 3. But I had a team that was pretty hungry, because on that team, you know, one of the criticisms we had was that we didn't have any finals experience. And, you know, everyone would remember in 2001, every final series that year was unbelievable, not just ours. It went to 3 games. So it was one of the best years and most competitive years in the NBL, I think. And we were getting our experience as we're going along. But what I said to the boys, and to this day, obviously the Hawks haven't won a championship, so they'll be looking to try and win one under Gorgie. But, you know, where we were placed financially, economically, the odds were against us in some respects. So we did something pretty special, still being the only small town ever to win an NBL championship. So, yeah, a lot of highs and lows through it. You know, along the way, you know, when you get told to retire by your coach, really difficult to accept. So when I have to talk, you know, having had that experience, it was really difficult. But, you know, these days when you have to, I think it's helped me as a coach. If I have to talk to a player about retirement or disappointment, I have a lot of empathy. I think it's pretty important as a coach to have some empathy and think about, put yourself in that person's shoes when you're actually trying to communicate with them. So I think all those experiences have helped me as a coach, including going back to school. I know you're going back, you know, wanting to go back and educate. I think I'm definitely a better coach for going to university and studying management. Has helped me with my leadership and management of players as well. I don't think I would have been as good a coach. And, you know, I give credit to my wife about that. Like in the mid-'80s, I went back to university, gave up my job as an electrician because I wanted to try and make the Olympic team, which I didn't make, but dedicated so much time as an athlete to try and be the best basketball player I could. But I found I had this free time and, you know, a lot more free time than I normally did. I dwell on losses. I dwell on poor performance, which we hear a lot about today in the NBA, not just the NBL, but in the AFL. How to manage that. But that was occurring. And then that's when my wife said, "You want to go back to uni?" And I found that gave me balance. I definitely became a better basketball player when I went to uni from 85 to 87 at Victoria University. And it gave me more skills as well. You know, I was studying psychology and how to, you know, manage my own emotions as well. And certainly when I look back now, it's helped me as a coach. So, you know, basketball's hasn't given me like a massive amount of money here in Australia, but it's given me some unbelievable experiences, you know, at the local level, the national level. And you know, we haven't talked about it, you know, my coaching career with the Hawks, you know, 11 and a half years, whatever it was, winning the championship, multiple finals. Another highlight was coaching the Gold Coast Blaze in its first year and making the playoffs, because we all know that's really, really tough to do. And the Gold Coast had never had a team make the finals before. So that's a highlight for me, you know, even though, you know, you don't end up coaching teams for different reasons. All coaches, you know, at some stage they're going to get sacked. But again, it's like anything. When a player's career ends, you know, how you handle that, how you manage that is pretty important, whether you stay in the game. So you've got to have some resilience. We keep saying to players, we've got to have it as coaches. So, you know, I've had some tough experiences, a lot of highlights, though, when you look back as well. And I'm a big believer telling players to celebrate those highlights, because there's probably less highlights or less ups than downs. There's more downs than ups as a player and as a coach. And, you know, experience that with the national team. You know, again, what's the high? I went to 2 Olympics with the Boomers. I coached the women at the Olympics. I went to the World Championships with the men in Japan, the World Championships, and we won a medal, bronze medal, you know, with the women. So the highlights have been massive, and you just got to keep everything in perspective. And I try and pass that on. I know we've had numerous conversations about not getting too high and not getting too low. And that, you know, the experience certainly, the experiences certainly help in that way. And if I had to pass advice on to anybody, whether it be a player or coach, that's something. Don't get too high, don't get too low. Try and stay grounded, humble, and don't rest on your laurels. Keep striving to get better.
I love that. And I actually want to jump in right there, Chuck, because obviously, you know, your coaching resume is it speaks for itself, the amount of things that you've done here in Basketball Australia. But I want to talk a little bit, I suppose, about like your philosophy and some of the principles and whatnot that you really hold to yourself and you hold to your players as well. Can you talk to us a little bit about, I suppose, your philosophy as a coach?
Yeah, well, when I first started out, obviously your philosophy changes, and it should. You know, if it's still the same after 20 or 30 years, I think you've got a problem.
Yeah.
Because, you know, the style of plays changed, the game's changed, how we should manage people and communicate with people has changed. You know, back when I played, it was do exactly what the coach tells you to do, run through the wall, you know, and then in the mid-'80s, we all started asking what's on the other side of the wall, which everybody does now, and what is the wall made of, you know, before I run through it, whereas we just did what we were told. So, you know, you bring back some memories. When I think about my first coaching interview, I had, you know, 4 things just off the top of my head, Ryan. It was, you had to be committed. I don't think you go anywhere without a work ethic. You know, you had to be disciplined and follow through and stay focused on that. You know, another thing was realistically, I had there was about preparation. And, you know, just when I thought about preparation back then, it was, you know, this is as a coach, making sure your team's in the best conditioned team, individually breaking it down. Where does each player need to improve? And what do they bring to, you know, in regard to how you want to play. So not everybody's great, but trying to focus on, okay, what are the strengths of each player and make sure that those players are allowed to do what they do well. And as you probably hear that from a lot of players I've coached, it's something that stuck with them. I heard it from Kelly Wilson, which she surprised me. She said she liked the fact, just do what you do well, because I think that confidence is a big thing. And if you try and put players in areas where they're not going to succeed, they're going to lose confidence. So it's about putting them in areas where they can succeed and figuring out what they can do well, not only for you as a coach, but they need to know. Most of them do know. You just have to ask them, but then you've got to put them within a structure that they succeed. The 4th one was unity. You know, you don't have any success with any team if you're not united, and there's always challenges along the way. And that's evolved to so many things now. You know, resilience is a big thing. That's part of my philosophy in making sure that players have got support. We talked about empathy. You've got to provide some empathy. Obviously, if they're going to be resilient, the style of play is even more paramount now and so important. And that's another part. Does your style of play allow players to be the best they can be, or is it too strict? Are you stifling them? You know, is there too much structure there where they're paralysed in their mind? You know, you need structure, but then you've got to be careful that they're not overthinking. Players aren't overthinking. And I know that from personal experience as a player, because I think I overthought a lot of the time, you know. So, you know, there's just things being that have been added on there, which include my philosophy. And one of the things I didn't have it written down at the time, but is consistently evaluate, not just at the end of the season, but, you know, evaluate each game, you know, and that comes back through, obviously, through scouting, which is very important. And these days with analytics, which has evolved from when I first began, we really didn't have any. I didn't have a written scouting report, even when I played, you know, so we just talked about it. So the game's evolved to the point where you've got to evaluate weekly. You've got to evaluate, you know, I like every 4 games to see where the trends are after 4 games. Even if you're losing, there's a lot of the positives there that you can latch onto. That's going to help not only your confidence, the coach, but the team. And so if you're losing, are you still heading in the right direction? Because sometimes when you're winning, you could be heading in the wrong direction as well. So if you're not evaluating or got your KPIs, sometimes you just do enough to win, and that can hide your weaknesses and hide the problems. So it's, you know, it's really important that style of play, how you evaluate it offensively and defensively, and then back individually, is pretty important to the success. So, you know, I'm talking about the higher level, all right? So, again, if we get back to the juniors, and I think I spoke about this to a couple of people, the under 14s and 16s in particular, under 12s and 14s, they don't need scouting. They need to be focused on just their individual development and realistically focused on what they need to do well as a team, because they're still developing. So I think just as, you know, with junior coaches, you just got to be careful. You probably start introducing at 16s. But then again, if you've got this great under 14 team, there might be something that you'll talk about. Okay, we're going to stop the layup of our opponent. You know, this is how you do it. But you don't want to make it complicated, and especially with the juniors, because you want players to flourish and not have too much to think about. And as you know, Ryan, you've been involved with this. We've got to be careful with the senior players that we don't give them too much to think about, because you've still got to lock down on what you want to do. So style of play and evaluating that, they're pretty important things. But the unity, mate, that one still exists. The work ethic still exists. I don't want anyone that doesn't want to work hard. I don't want anyone, because they're going to hurt you and down the track, you know, at some particular point. And then there's the tough periods through your ups and downs, you know, that you go through, not only as individuals, but as a teams, and maintaining your focus on the process. So I'm really process driven more than what I ever was, probably more so, you know, back even when I played, you know, you thought about it. You probably didn't have the direction to break it all down as we did, you know, but certainly now, you know, my learnings are through my experience to have an open mind and continue to learn. And you've got to evolve. So, you know, in a nutshell, there's 8 things I think I've talked about there that are pretty important, and they're probably the ingredients to my philosophy these days.
Yeah, definitely. Love that, Brendan. I do. And obviously, assisting you a couple of times in NBL 1 last year, obviously I've seen what you're like with your players and whatnot, and the coaching staff, you know, weeks leading up to the games and in the locker rooms and things like that. And yeah, you definitely, all those things you just spoke about, you definitely represent them all with the coaches and with the players. And it's, yeah, it was pretty special to be around. So I want to talk now just a little bit about the actual inaugural NBL 1 season with you, with us here at the Miners. So obviously, you coached with us back in the day, and then you've come back to us and obviously leading the Miners in the NBL 1 inaugural season. Can you tell us a little bit about that experience and what it was like coming back to Ballarat and coaching the Miners again?
Yeah, no, look, it was pretty special. I didn't know really what to expect. We basically, as you know, had a lot of players leave, including the previous coach, you know, so you're starting out from scratch. And, you know, just those building blocks that I talked about with my philosophy, obviously I shared that with the players, but I also asked them what they wanted to achieve. So, you know, the other big part of this philosophy, probably I didn't touch on it as much, I did talk about the communication side, is empowerment. So empowering the players, the best way to do that is evolve them in setting the goals. So as you know, Ryan, a big part of that was getting them to understand where they wanted to go and then how we were going to achieve it. So if they decide the path, then they're more likely to lock in and, you know, really back it up with their actions in being successful. So, you know, I know how to win. I guess my experience has provided me with a lot of knowledge of knowing how to win and knowing what needs to be in place. I'm not guessing. I know, you know, and that might come across as arrogant, but I've had so many experiences and consistently, you know, those parts of the philosophy, if those things are in place, I know. But it doesn't matter what I know or feel, it's what or believe that has to transfer into the players. So the best way to get that is to empower them and get them to understand. I definitely share it, but then they've got to figure it out. And as you know, we came up with some pretty good trademarks. Each player had their own trademark, as you saw, which I'm big on. And then
coaches had them as well.
Yeah, and
because we all like to build them out.
You know, too often you ask of players, coaches ask of players to do certain things, but they don't live those values themselves. So it's real, and not only our coaches, as you know, I got the staff involved as well, physios, and you know, our team managers. So we're all on the same page. So, you know, for me, it was about just the biggest thing was obviously getting them to play together early, and there's some constraints because we've got guys that, you know, work at our level. We've got guys that are aspiring to be in the NBL, like Shorty and Dengy and Crony were. So their goals are different, you know, but our goal was obviously to make the playoffs in the end and go as far as we could and try and win it. And which is a big, you know, which is pretty big when you bring a team together for the first time to try and achieve that and haven't played together before. But then we talked about how we're going to achieve it, go back to that process. So I won't go into the detail of that, but, you know, again, that's part of, you know, get through the highs and lows, but focusing on the style of play. And as you know, Ryan, being around, and I'm very into being aggressive on the defensive end.
Very much so.
Yeah, and playing fast. So playing fast to a point where other teams, you know, might find it difficult, but then you've got to control tempo. So there's that balance. And then you've got to manage like the different people's goals of what they want to achieve within, I call it a team ego. They've got to put their individual ego aside for the team ego, you know, because we have players like Shorty and Danga and, you know, what can happen in NBL1 players and imports as well. Let's talk about imports. You know, they come out here, they want the next job. They want to move further in their careers. So they're just worried about numbers. And so I'm not talking anything here that coaches don't know about. The biggest challenge is to get those imports or those players that have got their own individual goals to play within what we need to achieve as a team. So if someone's open, pass them the ball instead of trying to get extra 2 points. Because if the team's successful, I keep telling the players, you'll get noticed eventually. The sun will shine on you, at some stage in successful teams. So as you know, we started to build that. And we not only shared that with the minors, I really feel part of our development. And if we had injuries, and as we did, we let players go away late in the year to NBL teams, and even early in the year, we had a lot of disruptions. The youth league team that yourself and Daniel, we were aligned, and we ran the same stuff. So I could bring players up, and as you know, move players down to you guys to help you guys, and you guys went on to actually win the championship. So you guys, that I'm pretty proud of that because we were aligned, same style of play, but we worked together as a team and had great communication. And that allowed some of our younger guys to develop. And as you know, some of those younger guys like Zach Dunmore got to play. They weren't just sitting on our bench. I played them some minutes in some games. And then they go back to you and be a dominant player. So, again, that's a process of what I've learned as far as not only, our team success, we all talk about the winning side. The development side of it is aligning that pathway. And I think that helped us. That creates enthusiasm when we bring younger guys in to train with us. And it develops players for the future and it expedites. Let's go back to Nunawading. Young Will. Zach really, was in our team, the minors team, as an 18, 19-year-old. And there's other players, obviously, as you know, we had trained with us that didn't necessarily play a lot, but we had them in there in our top 15. We moved them in.
They were involved.
Feeds, Mackenzie, quite a few of them. So that's all going to help them for the future and help the club. So, I was pretty proud of our achievement. One of the things I did notice, our crowds from day one were pretty good. I think everyone was pretty hyped up and positive. We played an exciting brand, but as the season went on, it seemed like the stadium was full every night. And I think that's it's not just about winning, knowing that people want to come and watch you play is pretty important. And we fell one game short to the experienced Nunawading, who had a lot of heartbreak and heartache, my old club, previously. So, they if anything stood out, we probably just lacked a little bit of experience, losing that game by a couple of points in the end, and they went on to win it. So, but we beat Kilsyth. We had 2 home finals, and we finished on top of the ladder. So it was a really, really great year. But I just think we created a bit of an excitement, and you guys won your way up to championship now. So it was a pretty good year. And when I go back early days, my first year coaching the minors, we got knocked out in the finals in the first year, but we didn't win a final. And then we were back to back, and which is what led to me, developing my own coaching career. I had 3 clubs looking at me back then, but we had a strong team. We had some great Australian talent that we developed, and then I moved on. And as you know, I brought Damon Lowry, I brought Eric Cooks to Wollongong, which were in some ways, Lowry was a big part of us winning. Cookie was an assistant coach by then. So, it's the friendships, the relationships you develop, but seeing people improve, seeing people develop, not only from a playing point of view, so from a coaching point of view, watching you and Nagsy from the beginning to the end, big difference. You might not notice it, but I noticed it, and how you coached and how you worked with the team and the players as well from a youth league point of view. So it's quite exciting, the fact that we've got that relationship between the youth league and the minors. I'm obviously hoping to keep majority of the players. With everything that's going on, we don't know that yet. But, mate, all you can do is coach what's in front of you. And we had a great year and we had a great time. This year's been really interrupted and disrupted, obviously, with COVID. So we haven't had a chance to play. But, just looking forward to obviously trying to build on what we've already achieved.
Definitely. I love that, Chuck. So we'll move on now to so basically, Brandon, what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask your top 3 favourite moments in the sport. So I need you to try to find or figure out three of your favourite moments. They could be when you were a player, as a coach. But yeah, 3 of your top moments, and a special thank you to Peter Stevens, MG, and also McCafe Ballarat as well for this podcast. So yeah, Chuck, 3 of your favourite basketball moments.
Yeah, it's pretty tough. I've had plenty of them.
As I said, 3. So that could be as a player, as a coach, whatever you want. But yeah, try to bring it down to 3.
Yeah, as a player, I've got this memory of being 20 points down. I think it was in 1987, playing with the Spectres, and we were playing the North Melbourne Giants in the Victorian Basketball Association Grand Final at the Glass House. And it was packed. And I remember back then a lot of ex-players like Paul Roos and that, who used to play basketball in Nunawading. He was playing Fitzroy at the time. You know, they were a strong team in the 80s. So it was the who's who in the zoo was there that night. And we were 20 down at halftime. Yeah. And it was a massive game. North Melbourne Giants, or Coburg Giants at that time in the VBA, were undefeated. And we had a mixture of a young team with a couple of experienced players, myself, Bruce Bolden and Vince Hinchin. And from memory, the younger players, I think, were Darren Lucas, just babies, Stephen Lenarden and Grant Cadee. And we looked like we were done, mate. And we came back and won that thing. And so that was an unbelievable memory, and just seeing the supporters celebrate that. And then we couldn't really celebrate with them. We couldn't drink because then we had to play the North Melbourne Giants on the Friday night. That was a Wednesday night, 2 days later in an NBL game. And then we beat them again. So that's a pretty big memory. You know, I talked about the NBL Grand Final. It was great getting there, but that's probably, you know, a sad memory. But there's 2 coaching memories I've got from the NBL that are pretty big. Obviously, winning the NBL championship. You know, Wollongong had never won one. Small town, but that Gold Coast team that I coached, first year making the finals in
that was their first year, correct?
Yeah. Called the Gold Coast Blaze. So we made the playoffs in our first year, and we had tremendous obstacles. You know, we were sitting on a second or third on the ladder, and one of our players had a stroke, which we didn't know at the time.
Well,
one of our imports, and we lost him for about 4 or 5 weeks. So we dropped a few games. But I really believe if we had him that night, we beat Townsville in Townsville, and we moved up to second on the ladder. I think we're 12-5, and then we dropped the next 5 because it was just so sad, you know, with what happened to our guy. It just really went through the team, and then we got another import, but we still managed to make the playoffs, and that's a massive memory because, you know, especially on the Gold Coast, you know, when I looked at the history of teams, they always started off well, but then the nightclubs got hold of them halfway through the season. So that's your biggest challenge with those teams in that small. There's so much for players to do and get distracted and can get lost. So we had a big thing on culture. You know, I brought up Tony Shaw, my buddy who I grew up with, who's obviously Collingwood captain, Norm Smith medalist, to talk about character and about winning. You know, I've used Terry Wallace, another mate who went to footy. You know, had the choice between footy and basketball. They did too. They chose footy. I chose basketball. To this day, we're still friends. So I've utilised those people to be successful in sport, obviously communicate with my team. So the biggest fear we had on the Gold Coast was being distracted and getting lost in the community. And to make the playoffs in that first year was just amazing. But, mate, I've got more than 3. You know, going to the Olympic
I know
Games,
you do.
You know, that's pretty special. Talking to guys like Kobe Bryant, talking to, you know, great coaches like Greg Popovich and Larry Brown, and just those moments. There's a lot of moments. You know, I mentioned the Opals before. You know, that rebuild of that team. You know, no Lauren Jackson, no Christy Harrower. Even Lizzie got injured before the World Championships a week out. We're in France to win that bronze medal and beat Turkey, 20,000 people at the game, to beat the Turkish national women's team. You know, on their home court to win the bronze medal, mate. That was pretty amazing. You know, and we only lost one game to the US. So there's a lot of highlights there, but they're probably the ones that jump out. You know, another highlight is watching all my kids play. You know, they all played for different states where we lived. My girls played for New South Wales. Daniel played for New South Wales. That girls actually played under 20s for Queensland. I watched Daniel win a gold medal in the under 20s for New South Wales. I watched the girls win a bronze. So just watching your kids come through the system as well. Yeah, they're just other highlights. Are the biggest highlights. Now they're all highlights.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, Jock, we're going to need to wrap it up for today, but I definitely think you and I've got far more that we could talk about. So I definitely think we're going to get you back on the podcast at some point, and we'll call this part 1, and then we'll wait for part 2 because there's a lot more to talk about.
No worries, mate. It's been great. It's been great being involved with you guys as well, including yourself.
Appreciate it, Jock. Thank you so much for jumping on. It's been awesome. I definitely think all the viewers are going to enjoy this podcast. It's a special one. Thank you again, Brendan, for jumping on.
Go Miners and Rush.